Hello, horror lovers. Welcome to the chilling world of Mr. Haunt. Please subscribe. It's our biggest motivation to keep bringing you spine-tingling stories. Let us know in the comments which city you're listening from. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit the like button. Now, let's get into the stories. I was 22 when it happened, freshly graduated and too confident for my own good. I had taken a research assistant role for a conservation project in northern Washington, deep forest territory. Our team was documenting old-growth tree populations and monitoring trail camera footage in remote areas. It sounded like an adventure, the kind of rugged naturalist experience I could brag about later. I had no idea how wrong I was. We were stationed in a cabin roughly 10 miles from the closest paved road, surrounded on all sides by thick pines and maples. The forest was ancient. It smelled rich and alive, teeming with birdsong during the day and the distant howls of coyotes at night. I shared the cabin with my supervisor, Dr. Elsie Hammond, and a grad student named Peter. Everything seemed normal. The first 2 weeks, we cataloged tree rings, set up new camera traps, and logged animal activity, mostly deer, raccoons, and the occasional black bear. But then one morning, we found a camera pulled from its tree and smashed into the ground. It had been installed high, at least 9 feet up, and the tree bark showed deep claw marks. Like someone or something had tried to rip it off deliberately. Dr. Hammond brushed it off as a bear incident. Maybe a large male, she said. Territorial behavior, but I wasn't so sure. Bears don't usually attack equipment. They sniff it, maybe knock it once or twice, but tearing it down and shredding the casing, it felt intentional. That night, we heard something outside. Heavy footfalls. Peter and I froze in our bunks, while Dr. Hammond stood near the window, peeking through the blind. Whatever it was big, not just heavy, intelligent. We heard it circle the cabin, once, twice. Then it let out this sound, a kind of clicking growl, like bones grinding together, and an animal's growl at the same time. We didn't sleep. The next day, we hiked out to check the rest of the trail cameras. 3 more had been yanked off trees. One was found buried beneath a stack of stones. Another was missing entirely, but the one still intact had footage. We gathered around Dr. Hammond's laptop in the cabin to review the footage. It started with static, then the motion sensor kicked in. Something had triggered it. At first, all we saw were leaves rustling, but then something moved into frame. Just for a second, it looked like a person, hunched, hairless, with limbs too long for its torso. Pale gray skin, no clothes, and its face, dear God, its face. Wide eyes, no nose, and a slit of a mouth. It looked directly into the camera before the feed cut out. Peter threw up. I felt sick. Dr. Hammond said nothing for a long time. Then she shut the laptop and said, "We're not showing this to the park rangers." "Why not?" Peter demanded. "Because they won't believe us, and if they do, they'll shut us down." That night, we made plans to leave, but before we could, Peter disappeared. He had gone to collect firewood. It was still light out. He said he'd be back in 20 minutes. An hour passed. Then another. We shouted for him. Nothing. We grabbed flashlights and searched until night fell. We found his flashlight 10 feet off the trail. Its bulb shattered. Next to it were drag marks in the dirt. Dr. Hammond called for emergency evacuation, but the satellite phone cut out halfway through the call. We tried again. Nothing. Then we heard it again. That same clicking growl, only louder. Closer. We barricaded ourselves inside the cabin. Hours passed. I do not remember sleeping. Just trembling under a blanket, listening. At some point during the night, I swear I heard Peter outside, calling for help in a flat, emotionless voice. "I'm hurt. Come out here, please." But it was wrong. It didn't sound like him. It sounded like someone trying to imitate him. A perfect copy. Too perfect. The next morning, we found the door scratched up and clawed deep gouges in the wood. We didn't wait any longer. We packed our gear and hiked the full 10 miles back to the ranger station without stopping. We didn't talk. We didn't rest. Peter was never found. His case remains open. Officially, they called it an animal attack. Unofficially, no one wants to talk about it. Dr. Hammond quit the project 6 weeks later. I never heard from her again. As for me, I still go hiking sometimes, but I never go off trail. And I never go near Bitter Creek again. Because whatever was in those woods, it wasn't an animal. And it wasn't human either. It was something else. Something that watches. Something that mimics. And I think it's still out there. I was 28 when I decided to move to the lakeside town of Stillwater. The decision wasn't dramatic. No heartbreak, no trauma, just exhaustion from the grind of city life and a need to find a slower rhythm, something quieter. I found a small fixer, upper cabin right on the edge of Stillwater Lake. Locals called it haunted, cursed, even sacred, depending on who you asked. But I didn't put much weight in stories. Not back then. The town was small, quiet, tightly knit, and they didn't take to strangers quickly. They were polite, but wary, especially when they found out I'd bought the old Bishop cabin. "You'll hear things," one gas station clerk told me on my second day in town. "Don't go looking for them. That lake don't like attention." I laughed it off. The first few weeks were peaceful. I spent my days renovating, sanding old floorboards, and fixing pipes. Nights were a little less calm. The lake was dead silent 1 minute and filled with whispers the next, the kind of sound that made you feel like something was speaking just below the surface. Muffled in ancient dot, I started having the same dream, always the same. I'd be standing on the dock, staring into the water. Something moved under it, big and slow, not fish, not natural. Then a face, not human, not animal, would rise to the surface, eyes locked onto mine. I'd wake up sweating. I told myself it was the isolation, the stress of change. Then came the footprints. One morning, I found them at the edge of the dock. Huge prints, but wrong, webbed and clawed, too wide for a bear, too long for a man. I took pictures, showed them to a neighbor, old Mr. Cadwell. He paled. "That's the lake father," he said. "You disturbed him." According to him, the lake was home to an old god, or cryptid, depending on what you believed. Something between fish, man, and demon. Locals had always fed it small game on full moons. Nothing big, just enough to keep it sleeping. Of course I didn't believe him, but that night, I couldn't sleep. I heard the dock creak, heavy steps, slow breathing. I grabbed my flashlight, but the beam only reached so far. Fog rolled across the lake, thick, wet, and then I saw it. It was crouched at the end of the dock, massive, wet, glistening skin, a head too large, eyes reflective like coins dropped in oil. Its chest expanded as it breathed, nostrils flaring. Then it stood, towering over me. I froze. It didn't move, didn't blink. I backed into the house, locked the door, and stayed up until morning. By daylight, it was gone, but the footprints remained. I tried to leave that day, packed my truck, but the road out was flooded. No rain, no storm, just water, rising where it shouldn't have. The town sheriff found me parked at the edge of the impassable road. He didn't act surprised. "Once you've seen him," he said, "he sees you too." I moved back into the cabin. Slowly, I gave in. I started leaving offerings, rabbits, raccoons, fish, anything. The dreams lessened, the whispers stopped. Still water never let me go. It doesn't let anyone go, not once you've looked into his eyes. I live quietly now, never looking at the lake for too long. Sometimes visitors pass through, hikers, campers, some stay, some disappear. The lake remembers everyone, and now, so do I. It was the thick fog that set me on edge. I was 24, fresh out of college, still unsure about where life was headed. I had spent years living in a small town just outside of Denver, with the weight of schoolwork always hovering over me. So, when I finally had the opportunity to get away for a few days, I jumped at it. My best friend, Sarah, and I packed our things and headed toward Cold Springs, a cabin rental just off the grid. We were supposed to relax, to leave behind the noise and chaos. I should have known, though, when I first heard about Cold Springs from the old man at the gas station, that something wasn't quite right. He warned me in that strange, broken voice of his, something about not staying out too late and avoiding the river. His eyes darted to the dark clouds on the horizon, but I thought nothing of it. People in small towns tend to get superstitious about places they don't understand, right? We reached the cabin just before sundown. It was exactly what I had hoped for. A small wooden house, tucked away between towering pines. The only sound was the whisper of the wind through the trees. We dropped our bags, made dinner, and laughed as we cracked open a bottle of wine. But then night fell, and with it came the fog. It rolled in thick and fast, swallowing up the mountainside like an ancient beast. From the windows, I could barely make out the outline of the trees, let alone the river the man had mentioned. The chill settled into my bones, but I told myself, it was just the weather. It was normal to be cold in the mountains at night. After all, we decided to turn in early, or at least I tried. As soon as I settled into the bed, the house felt wrong. The walls felt too thin, and the air grew too heavy. I tried to ignore the creeping sense of dread, but it gnawed at the edges of my mind. I must have fallen asleep at some point, but the dream was worse than any nightmare I'd had before. I was standing at the edge of a river, the water black and still. A voice, soft, pleading, called to me from the other side. It was a woman's voice, distorted, like someone trying to speak through the deepest part of the ocean. My feet were rooted to the earth, my body frozen. Every time I tried to turn away, the voice grew louder, more desperate. I woke up with a gasp, the sound of the voice still echoing in my head, but I wasn't sure if I had actually heard it in my dream, or if it had followed me back into the waking world. I could hear Sarah's soft breathing from the other bed. I thought about getting up, but the thought of stepping into the dense fog outside made my skin crawl. The next day, we ventured out to explore the surrounding woods. The fog was still thick, and we found ourselves walking in circles, unable to find any clear path. We ended up stumbling upon an old, abandoned shack near the river. It was completely run down, the roof caved in, and the windows long shattered, but there was something unsettling about it. Like it had been waiting for us. Sarah, ever the adventurous one, suggested we go inside. I was reluctant, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside, it was musty and dark, the floor covered in layers of dust. We walked through the rooms slowly, our footsteps echoing in the silence. That's when I noticed the strange symbols etched into the walls. They were crude, hastily carved, but still too deliberate to be random. Some of them looked like eyes, others like twisted faces. My stomach twisted in response, and I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. "Look at this," Sarah said, pointing toward the far wall. There was a large symbol painted in what looked like dark red stains. The edges were rough, but it was unmistakable. It resembled a spiraling circle with jagged lines radiating from it. "It's like a warning," she whispered, more to herself than to me. That's when the wailing started. At first, I thought it was the wind, but as the sound grew louder, I realized it wasn't just the wind. It was human, a voice, high-pitched, raw, and unrelenting. The sound of someone in pain. It echoed from the riverbank, a long, drawn-out wail that sent an icy chill through my veins. Sarah and I exchanged nervous glances, both of us rooted in place for a moment before we both turned and bolted out of the shack. We ran back to the cabin, our hearts racing, adrenaline coursing through our veins. When we got inside, we locked every door, every window, and huddled in the living room in silence. But even then, we could hear it, softly at first, and then more clearly. The crying, growing louder, like someone was trying to reach us. The sound of desperation. Sarah was the first to break the silence. "We need to leave. Right now." I didn't argue. We gathered our things, ready to pack up and leave. But when we went outside to head for the truck, the fog had completely engulfed the cabin. It was so thick, we could barely see our hands in front of our faces. And then I heard it, the wail again, so close now that it felt as though it was just on the other side of the fog, waiting for us. I felt the hair on my neck stand up as the temperature seemed to drop. "Get in the truck," I urged Sarah, my voice strained with panic. We rushed to the truck, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the keys. I could still hear the wailing. It wasn't fading, like I had expected. It was coming from all around us now, surrounding us like a chorus of ghosts. The fog seemed to close in, thickening around us until the world outside the truck was nothing but a white blur. And then, right beside us, I saw her, a figure, pale and disfigured, standing in the fog just outside the window. Her face was twisted, eyes wide and empty, the skin stretched too tightly across her bones. Her mouth was open, and from it, the wail continued, louder now, desperate. I slammed the truck into gear and sped out of there. But as I drove, I could hear the wailing still, like it was chasing us, following us through the fog. We didn't stop until we reached the nearest town hours later. We never went back to Cold Springs. The place was gone from the maps, no one could tell us what had happened. But the look in their eyes, when we mentioned the fog, the wailing, it was like they knew. I don't know who, or what, was out there, in those woods. But it's been years, and sometimes, when I'm alone in the dark, I still hear it. The wailing, it haunts me. Sometimes, I think it's calling me back. The night it all started, I was helping my grandmother clean out her attic in Bitter Hollow, Arkansas, a swamp-hemmed patch of land no one visits unless they're born there or running from something. She'd been getting forgetful, kept muttering about keeping the lights off after sundown and never looking at the cypress line too long. I chalked it up to old age and too many ghost stories. Still, I didn't argue. I just stacked boxes and listened. That's when I found the journal. It was under a floorboard, wrapped in wax paper, rotting at the edges. The handwriting was hers, dated from 1963, when she was around my age. The entries started off normal. Gardening notes, boys in town, the family mule being sick. But after July 17th, everything changed. Saw it again tonight, staring from the tree line, red eyes. Too tall for any man. Mama says don't look at it too long or it learns your face. I thought it was some silly superstition, until the night I looked out the window. There, across the field behind her house, stood a figure just barely illuminated by moonlight. It was tall, slender, almost human in shape, but not quite. The shoulders curved wrong, The arms hung low, past its knees, and its eyes were glowing red. Not the soft reflection of an animal. These pulsed, like embers flaring with breath. It didn't move, just watched. I closed the curtain, told myself it was a trick of the light. Then came the tapping. Light at first, against the glass of the kitchen door. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't move. Neither did my grandmother. She sat in her recliner, hands clenched around the rosary like it was the only thing keeping her heart in her chest. "It followed you," she whispered. "It knows you now." The taps grew harder, urgent, then it stopped. We didn't sleep that night. At dawn, she handed me a pouch filled with salt, bones, and dried herbs I didn't recognize. "Hang this above your bed, and never, never whistle at night." I wish I'd listened. 3 nights later, restless and wired from lack of sleep, I stood on the back porch for air. The heat was thick, crickets silent. Just for fun, to break the silence, I whistled, a soft, slow tune my dad used to hum. It answered the same tune, whistled back, flawlessly. From the woods, I froze. It kept whistling, louder, closer then. From behind me, I heard it. The screen door creaked open, not from behind, but in front of me. Something was on the porch. It had gotten past me. I ran, tripped over myself, slammed the door behind me, locked it, and pressed my back against the wood. But there was nothing outside, until I looked at the living room, through the window. I saw it, standing in my grandmother's chair. Its skin was pale, grayish, like stretched parchment over bone. Its arms bent at odd angles, and its head cocked sideways, like it didn't quite understand how necks were supposed to work. It was wearing her skin, not fully, not like a mask, like it had tried it on, but didn't know how to fit inside. Her voice came next, distorted, echoing, as if dragged from a well. "Darlin'," it said, "ain't you gonna give your old Nana a hug?" I blacked out. When I woke it was morning. The house was empty. The front door hung open. No blood, no mess. Just the rosary on the floor and the pouch of bones torn apart. No one's seen my grandmother, since the town says she wandered into the swamp. But I know better. I never went back to Bitter Hollow. But sometimes, when I'm driving on back roads, I see a figure standing by the trees, watching, waiting, whistling. We weren't talking when my brother disappeared. That's the part that haunts me the most. Caleb and I had a falling out over something stupid. Money, I think. Or maybe it was about our dad's will. Either way, when he went missing during a solo camping trip in Idaho's Sawtooth Wilderness, I hadn't spoken to him in 6 months. He told Mom he just needed time away. A few nights alone under the stars. When he didn't come back, I was the one who volunteered to go out there. I knew the forest better than most. We'd grown up camping there as kids, running barefoot through pine needles and cooking hot dogs on sticks. The park rangers said they'd found his tent near Alpine Lake, intact, food untouched, no signs of struggle. Just Caleb's boots sitting neatly by the water's edge. That was the first thing that felt wrong. Caleb was the kind of guy who untied his boots with one foot, left the laces knotted, and kicked them wherever. He never lined anything up, but those boots, they looked staged, like someone trying too hard to imitate human behavior. I camped in the same spot. I had to know what happened. Call it guilt, or hope, or that stupid voice in your head that whispers, maybe he's not dead yet. The first night was uneventful. Just cold and quiet. The second night, I heard him, Eli. It was his voice. From the trees, I shot up in my sleeping bag, heart pounding like a hammer. "Caleb," I yelled. No answer then, from deeper in the woods. "Eli, come here." It was wrong. Not the voice, but the way it came out. Like it had been recorded and played back through cheap speakers, flat, with no emotion. But I ran into the dark anyway. Flashlight shaking in my grip, crashing through brush and branches until I hit a clearing dot, empty dot, and then I heard it again, behind me. This time, Eli, I'm here. I'm cold. It was closer. I turned and caught movement at the edge of the trees. Something tall, thin, wrong in all the subtle ways your brain notices before your eyes do. It stepped forward, and my flashlight flickered, as if it couldn't hold focus on the thing. I glimpsed skin, ashen, the texture of tree bark soaked in water. It had Caleb's face, or something wearing it, but the expression never changed. It just stared, eyes too wide, lips slack like a doll's. I didn't scream. I COULDN, single quotes. Instead, I ran. I ran until I collapsed back at camp, bolted the tent, and kept the knife close to my chest all night. The next morning, I found footprints around the tent. Not boots, bare feet. Large, heavy, and 6 toes. 3 spaced too far apart. I should have left, but I didn't. That night, the thing came again. Didn't speak this time, just circled the tent. I could hear it breathing, slow, intentional, like it was learning how. And then it started imitating Caleb's laugh. Not just the sound, the rhythm of it. The short burst followed by a snort. The same laugh he'd had since we were kids. It scratched the tent once. Just a single line, down the middle, then silence. When morning came, I packed up and hiked out, not stopping until I hit the ranger station. They didn't believe me, of course, but when I showed them the photo I'd taken, that blurry shot of the figure in the woods, the older ranger, Stevens, turned pale. He asked me to step outside. Once the others were gone, he told me there's a legend up there, old, even to the tribes that first lived in those mountains. Something that mimics, that watches, that waits until you're alone. It doesn't kill you. It replaces you. Takes your voice, your laugh, your habits, wears your skin like a trophy, and pretends to be you until it learns enough to move on. Stevens said they found a similar tent set up 3 years earlier. Same weird boots placement. Same missing camper. I never went back. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, my phone rings. Once don't know voicemail. No missed call. Just a single ring. And one time, when I picked up, all I heard was Caleb's laugh. When I was a park ranger in northern Minnesota, I saw something that forced me to leave the job and never look back. It was late October, just after the last wave of campers had cleared out. The forest was empty, quiet in the kind of way that makes you feel like the only soul on earth. That week, I was stationed at Beaver Lake, a small, tucked away spot rarely used by the public. There were cabins along the shoreline, primitive things without electricity, and my job was just to make sure none of them had been vandalized or damaged before winter locked them in. On my 3rd night there, I decided to sleep in cabin 3. It had the clearest view of the lake, and the sound of the water lapping against the shore always helped me sleep. That night, I kept the window cracked to let in the breeze. Cold air drifted in, and so did something else, a sound I couldn't place. It wasn't the wind, or an animal, or the trees groaning. It was breathing at first. I thought it was mine, deep and steady, in rhythm with my chest. But it wasn't. This was low, wet, too slow to be human. It came in cycles, like something was exhaling through waterlogged lungs just outside the window. I sat up and listened. It stopped. I got up and closed the window, heart thumping harder than I liked to admit. I locked the door, too, even though I hadn't done that once in my career. We were miles from the nearest road, and bears don't care much for latches. I barely slept the next morning. I walked down to the lake. Something was off. The sand at The shore was disturbed. A wide trench dragged from the waterline up to the grass, like something heavy had been hauled out of the lake and then stood there, just waiting. At the edge of the trench were prints, long ones, deep. Each foot had 6 toes. And they weren't bare prints. They looked human, but stretched, distorted, like a person who'd never learned to walk right. Like something that tried to mimic human feet and got it wrong. I reported it to headquarters, but nobody was there on the weekend. I left a message. That evening, I didn't stay in the cabin. I took my sleeping bag out to the small watchtower nearby and locked the trap door behind me. The thing was old, but still sturdy, and the view from up top gave me some comfort. At 2:43 a.m., I heard it again, breathing, except this time, it was closer. I leaned over the edge and looked down into the trees. And there it was, standing at the tree line. A figure, slender, unnaturally tall, skin pale and shining, like it had just emerged from the water. Its arms were too long, almost reaching the ground, and its head was tilted up, not looking at the tower, not looking at me, looking past me, like it was staring into something I couldn't see. I couldn't make out a face, just 2 hollows where eyes should have been, like someone had scooped them out with a spoon. It didn't move, it didn't blink, it just stood there, swaying slightly, as if the wind were holding it. Then, it spoke, not with words. Not really. It made a sound, low and strangled, almost like a baby crying underwater. I don't know how else to describe it. It didn't belong in a forest, or on Earth. I stayed in the tower until sunrise. When I finally descended, the sand at the lake was smooth again. The trench was gone, no footprints. Just the sound of the water, and the wind, and the feeling that something had happened. I left that day, didn't wait for my shift to end. Packed my things and drove until I was out of the county. I tried telling the higher-ups. They said I was overtired, maybe sick. Suggested I take a leave of absence. So I did, and I never went back. But sometimes, I still hear that breathing in my dreams. And sometimes, when I drive past a lake in the early morning fog, I think I see something standing in the water, watching, waiting, and I don't stop to check anymore. It was the summer I turned 32 when I finally decided to quit drinking. The withdrawal wasn't kind, but the silence that followed was worse. So I did what my sponsors suggested. Go somewhere quiet, get clean, stay away from the noise of the city. I rented a cabin up in Devil's Bend, a remote forest bluff that hung over an endless sea of trees in the Appalachian backwoods. It was supposed to be peaceful, cleansing, but what I found there was something else entirely. The cabin was barely a structure. Old boards, a sagging porch, and a musty smell that never left the walls. It had no neighbors, no road access. You parked at the ranger's shack and hiked 2 miles uphill. That was the appeal, I guess. No temptation, no liquor stores, no people. The first week was tough, but nothing out of the ordinary. Headaches, sweating, dreams that didn't make sense. But by the 9th night, I noticed something odd. Every morning when I'd wake up, the rocking chair on the porch would be facing a different direction. It didn't seem like much at first. I thought maybe I was just misremembering, or maybe the wind had shifted it. But on the 11th morning, the chair was no longer on the porch. It was in the middle of the clearing. I walked out, barefoot, just staring at it. It looked wrong out there, like a piece of someone's living room got dropped in the woods. I pushed it back to the porch. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the window and watched. At 2:17 a.m., something stepped out of the tree line. I didn't hear it. It didn't make a sound. It was tall, taller than any man I've seen. 7 feet, maybe more. Its limbs were too long, almost bowed, like its arms didn't end where they should. But the worst part wasn't its shape, it was the face. It didn't have one, just a smooth, almost featureless surface that looked like skin stretched over bone. And it moved with this awful stillness, like its body wasn't doing the moving. Like something else was dragging it forward. It walked straight to the rocking chair and sat. For almost 30 minutes, it just sat there, rocking gently, staring up at the cabin, at me. And then, it turned its head, not the way people do, but in a slow, jerking motion, like its neck was rusted, and looked right into the window. It didn't have eyes, but it looked. I backed away, heart hammering in my chest, not daring to blink. When I looked back, it was gone. The chair sat still, empty. I should have left then, but I told myself I was hallucinating, that this was detox, that my brain was playing tricks on me. The next night, I nailed the chair to the porch. I used a hammer and 4-inch steel spikes I found in the tool shed. I made sure that thing wasn't going anywhere. At 2:17, I waited again, and just like the night before, it came. This time, it stood in the clearing longer, tilting its head side to side, like it was confused, like it couldn't figure out why the chair wasn't where it was supposed to be. Then it moved toward the cabin, not quickly, not slowly either, just steadily, intentionally. I backed into the bathroom and locked the door. There's a small window there, too high to climb out of, but big enough to see through. It walked onto the porch, stood over the chair, reached down, and pulled it up, nails and all, like it was made of cardboard. Then it placed the chair back in the center of the clearing, and sat. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. I started counting the days until my rental was up, scratching tallies into the cabin wall. Every night, it came back. Same time, same ritual, until the night I made a mistake. It was day 22, and I hadn't slept more than an hour. I went outside just before sundown, shaking, half mad, and screamed at the tree line. What the hell do you want? I don't know why I thought shouting would help. That night, it came earlier, not at 2:17, at 12:03. And this time, it didn't stop at the clearing. It came to the window. It pressed that blank, awful face against the glass, and I swear I heard a voice, not out loud, but in my head, a whisper that wasn't mine. You looked. That's all it said. You looked. I packed everything the next morning, left the food, the gear, everything, hiked down barefoot, got back to the ranger shack just after noon. The ranger asked if I'd seen anything strange. I lied, said I just couldn't handle the isolation, but as I left, I saw something carved into the wood of the shack's porch railing. 4 simple words: don't watch the chair. It's been 3 years. I haven't had a drink since, haven't gone near the woods. But some nights, I still hear that chair creaking, like it's waiting for me. You know how some places just don't feel right? When I was a kid, my granddad used to say, some land remembers things, bad things, and sometimes it doesn't want to let them go. I thought it was just an old man's superstition. Now, I'm not so sure. The old quarry outside our town, Harper's Hollow, is one of those places. Everyone around here avoids it, even though there's a path straight from the hiking trails. Not a single sign or rope to block you off. People just know better. Except my brother D. I didn't single quotes to. Donnie was younger by 2 years, always the adventurous one. He had this stupid YouTube channel, doing dumb local dares and haunted hikes with his friends. I told him to stay away from the hollow. So did Mom, so did everyone. He didn't listen. I didn't find out he went until the cops showed up at my door. It was late September, already getting cold at night. His 2 friends said they were filming a cryptid call challenge, whatever the hell that means. They claimed they heard something howl from the trees around midnight, and then Danny just took off, ran toward it, not away. That was the last they saw of him. The search went on for 6 days. No footprints, no clothing, no signs of struggle. Just one thing left behind at the edge of the quarry cliff: his phone. I was allowed to go through it after they gave up the search. And what I found on there changed everything. It was a video, the last one he filmed. You couldn't see much, just shapes, trees at night. But you could hear it. This scream, it started like a woman crying for help. Then it shifted into something else, deeper, angrier, like something howling through shredded vocal cords. I've never heard anything so full of hate. But that wasn't the worst part. Near the end, Danny says something, whispering to whoever was holding the camera. Don't answer it. If it hears your voice, it remembers you. And then it cuts out. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep much the week after either. I should have let it go. I should have mourned him, like everyone else. But I needed to know what happened, so I went to Harper's Hollow myself. It was almost winter by then. The trees were bare, the wind sharp as knives. I parked near the old trail, followed it until the forest swallowed all sound. No birds, no crunch of animals, just dead silence. It felt like I'd stepped into a vacuum. When I got near the quarry's edge, I saw them. Tracks. Huge, misshapen. Footprints in the soft dirt, as wide as dinner plates. But only 3 toes. No claw marks. Just deep, heavy and dense, like someone dragging themselves uphill. And then I heard it. That same scream, echoing from the pit below. I couldn't stop myself. I looked over. There was something in the shadows, pale, long, limbed. It didn't have eyes, just gaping holes where they should have been. And it moved like a puppet being yanked by broken strings, twitchy, glitchy. It turned toward me. I didn't breathe, didn't blink. Then it opened its mouth, and my brother's voice came out. Help me, please, I'm so cold. It kept repeating it, like a broken record. The exact tone, cadence, panic, over and over, like it was wearing him. I ran. I don't remember how I made it to the car, but I do remember the screaming didn't stop until I crossed the tree line. Now, I live 2 counties over. I keep my curtains closed at night. I don't hike anymore. Sometimes, though, when the wind's just right, I swear, I hear it screaming, and every now and then, someone new goes missing near Harper's Hollow. They always leave their phone behind. I used to think the woods were my sanctuary. Growing up in southern Idaho, right outside the Snake River Plains, I spent more time beneath the trees than under my own roof. The cottonwoods behind our house stretched for miles, a forest older than memory, threaded with narrow game trails and forgotten hunters' blinds. I knew every bend and broken fence post, every rusted soda can left behind by kids from decades ago. That changed the night my brother went missing. It was September, crisp and dry. The sun had dipped low behind the hills, casting long amber shadows across the tree line. I was 23 then, living back home for a stretch after a layoff, trying to scrape together odd jobs and figure out my next step. Jamie, my younger brother, was 17 and going through that wild phase where he didn't think anything could touch him. We had been hiking since morning, tracking deer prints for fun, pretending we knew what we were doing. He wanted to stay out, after dark. You know the woods better than anyone, he said. Let's see if we can spot the elk herd. I almost said no. I should have. But I was flattered he still wanted to hang out with his older brother, so I agreed. We headed deeper in, past Miller's Creek and into the part of the woods even locals avoided. That's where the stories started. People whispered about something called The crawler, a pale thing, long-limbed animal, and man, all at once. They said it was fast, silent, that it mimicked voices to lure people off trail, that it came out when the stars were brightest. We thought it was just backwoods folklore, until it wasn't. Around 9:30 p.m., we were about 4 miles in, flashlight beams bouncing off trunks and dry leaves. The air was completely still. That's what struck me first. No wind, no crickets, no owls. Just a strange silence, like the forest was holding its breath. Jamie froze ahead of me. "Did you hear that?" he asked. I hadn't, but then I did. A crunch, then another. Something heavy, stepping on dry underbrush, but not walking, shifting, crawling. We swung our lights in the direction of the noise, and then we heard my mom's voice, clear as day, but she was home. "Jamie," the voice called, soft, trembling. "Honey, I need help." Jamie turned pale. That's Mom." "No, it's not," I snapped, grabbing his shoulder. "She's not out here." But he started moving toward it. That damn voice kept calling, getting fainter, leading him away. I shouted for him to stop, but he didn't listen. I chased him. We ran through bramble and low branches. The voice kept moving, leading. Then, dead silence. Jamie was gone. I searched all night. I screamed until my throat bled. I saw things in the dark, quick flashes of white, long shapes darting through the trees on all fours. I never saw Jamie again. The search lasted 3 weeks. Dogs picked up a trail that ended at an old logging road. They found torn scraps of his flannel shirt 30 feet up a pine, like it had been dropped from the sky. No blood, no footprints, nothing. I've walked those woods 100 times since, during the day, but I never go past Miller's Creek, and I never, ever go near the cottonwoods after dark. Last month, at 3:12 a.m., I got a voicemail from an unknown number. Just 3 words, "Come find me." It was Jamie's voice, but it wasn't him. Whatever you do, if you hear a familiar voice in the woods when it shouldn't be there, don't follow it, because what's calling you is not someone you love, and it doesn't want help. It wants you. I used to think the woods were my sanctuary. Growing up in southern Idaho, right outside the Snake River Plains, I spent more time beneath the trees than under my own roof. The cottonwoods behind our house stretched for miles, a forest older than memory, threaded with narrow game trails and forgotten hunter splines. I knew every bend and broken fence post, every rusted soda can left behind by kids from decades ago. That changed the night my brother went missing. It was September, crisp and dry. The sun had dipped low behind the hills, casting long amber shadows across the tree line. I was 23 then, living back home for a stretch after a layoff, trying to scrape together odd jobs and figure out my next step. Jamie, my younger brother, was 17 and going through that wild phase where he didn't think anything could touch him. We had been hiking since morning, tracking deer prints for fun, pretending we knew what we were doing. He wanted to stay out, after dark. "You know the woods better than anyone," he said. "Let's see if we can spot the elk herd." I almost said no. I should have. But I was flattered he still wanted to hang out with his older brother, so I agreed. We headed deeper in, past Miller's Creek, and into the part of the woods even locals avoided. That's where the stories started. People whispered about something called the crawler, a pale thing, long-limbed animal, and man, all at once. They said it was fast, silent, that it mimicked voices to lure people off trail, that it came out when the stars were brightest. We thought it was just backwoods folklore, until it wasn't. Around 9:30 p.m., we were about 4 miles in, flashlight beams bouncing off trunks and dry leaves. The air was completely still. That's what struck me first. No wind, no crickets, no owls. Just a strange silence, like the forest was holding its breath. Jamie froze ahead of me. "Did you hear that?" he asked. I hadn't, but then I did. A crunch, then another, something heavy stepping on dry underbrush, but not walking, shifting, crawling. We swung our lights in the direction of the noise, and then we heard my mom's voice, clear as day, but she was home. "Jamie," the voice called, soft, trembling. "Honey, I need help." Jamie turned pale. That's Mom." "No, it's not," I snapped, grabbing his shoulder. "She's not out here." But he started moving toward it. That damn voice kept calling, getting fainter, leading him away. I shouted for him to stop, but he didn't listen. I chased him. We ran through bramble and low branches. The voice kept moving, leading. Then, dead silence. Jamie was gone. I searched all night. I screamed until my throat bled. I saw things in the dark, quick flashes of white, long shapes darting through the trees on all fours. I never saw Jamie again. The search lasted 3 weeks. Dogs picked up a trail that ended at an old logging road. They found torn scraps of his flannel shirt 30 feet up a pine, like it had been dropped from the sky. No blood, no footprints, nothing. I've walked those woods 100 times since, during the day, but I never go past Miller's Creek, and I never, ever go near the cottonwoods after dark. Last month, at 3:12 a.m., I got a voicemail from an unknown number, just 3 words. "Come find me." It was Jamie's voice, but it wasn't him. Whatever you do, if you hear a familiar voice in the woods when it shouldn't be there, don't follow it. Because what's calling you is not someone you love, and it doesn't want help. It wants you. It started with a dare. Back when I was 17, my friends and I thought we were invincible. We did stupid things for laughs, for pride, and because boredom, in a small town like Marlow Ridge, could eat a teenager alive. So when Kyle dared me to swim across Black Pine Lake at midnight, I didn't hesitate. I should have. Black Pine was the kind of lake that looked like it didn't belong in this world. Pitch black even under the sun, cold year-round, and deeper than anyone could measure. Fishermen avoided the center. Boats stayed near the shallows, and no one, absolutely no one, swam it after dark. We had all heard the stories. They said the lake had no bottom, that people who swam too far out sometimes didn't come back. Some said it was cursed. Others blamed it on cold currents or deep water whirlpools. But the one that stuck with me, the one my granddad used to mutter when he thought I wasn't listening, was about something alive down there. Something old. Something that didn't sleep. Of course, I didn't believe any of it. It was a hot July night, the kind where the air feels too thick to breathe. The lake looked like a mirror of black glass. We parked at the north end, where the woods were thick, and the dock had rotted away years ago. I stripped down to my shorts, gave Kyle the finger, and dove in. The water hit me like ice. It took my breath away, but I kicked hard, powering through the cold. I could hear the others cheering, laughing, calling me crazy from the shore. I was halfway across when everything changed. First came the silence. The laughter stopped, abruptly, like someone had flipped a switch. I paused mid-stroke, floating in place, the water lapping gently at my chin. I looked back. The shore was distant. My friends just dark silhouettes. None of them moved. Then the cold deepened, not like the chill of mountain water, but something else. Something wrong? It seeped into my bones, and then I felt it. Pressure. Not physical, but emotional. A growing dread that pressed down on me like a weight. My chest tightened. My muscles tensed. I spun in the water, heart pounding. That's when I saw the light. Deep below me, far down in the blackness, a dim green glow flickered. It pulsed, slow and steady, too slow to be a diver's light. It grew brighter, closer. I treaded water, unable to move. The glow expanded, illuminating something enormous just beneath the surface. At first I thought it was a boulder, or maybe a submerged tree, but it shifted, twitched, and then opened an eye. Massive, unblinking, round and inhuman. It was milky, green, with a vertical slit, like a reptile. The pupil dilated slowly, as if adjusting to the sight of me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. I just stared, paralyzed. As the thing beneath the lake looked up at me, and then the water moved. Something brushed against my leg, slick, slimy, long, that broke the spell. I screamed and turned, kicking furiously. I swam like the devil was behind me, because something was. I didn't look back. I just swam until my lungs burned, and the shoreline finally reached out to me like salvation. I crawled out of the water, coughing and shaking. My friends stood frozen, eyes wide. Kyle helped me up. His hand was trembling. I asked him what they saw. He didn't answer at first. Then he said, quietly, "The water, it moved. Before you screamed, like it was boiling. Then something rose, behind you. It was huge. We saw the top of it, just for a second. Looked like a fin, or a spine. And then it disappeared. We never spoke of it again." The next morning, the sheriff's department was at the lake. A local boy, Jeremy Harlow, had gone missing while fishing overnight on the far side. They found his boat drifting in circles. No sign of him. I moved away from Marlow Ridge after high school, but I still dream of that night. The green glow, the eye, the pressure in the water. They say every town has its secrets. But some secrets aren't buried. They're waiting, just beneath the surface. If you ever find yourself at Black Pine Lake, don't go swimming after dark, no matter what anyone dares you. I still remember the summer I spent in the small town of Cedar Hollow, like it was yesterday. The town was quiet, almost too quiet, and its people kept to themselves. It wasn't until my second week there that I began hearing whispers about something strange that stalked the nearby forests. I had moved to Cedar Hollow to get away from the noise of the city. It seemed like the perfect place to start over, a chance to reset and find some peace. My new job as a park ranger meant that I'd be spending a lot of time in the forest, monitoring wildlife and ensuring the safety of the trails. But even before I arrived, I'd been warned to stay out of certain parts of the forest. The locals spoke in hushed tones, glancing over their shoulders, as if they feared the very mention of the place at first. I shrugged it off. Small towns always had their superstitions. But when I began my first shift in the forest, I started to notice things that made me question the safety of this quiet little town. It was a cool morning when I was assigned to monitor one of the lesser used trails deep within the forest. The trail had a reputation. People avoided it because it was thought to be cursed, haunted even. I laughed it off, thinking it was just an old wives' tale. But when I started my hike, I couldn't ignore the unsettling feeling that crept over me as the trees closed in around me. I've always loved nature, but there was something wrong about this place. The birds didn't sing here, and the rustle of the wind was oddly muffled. It felt like the forest was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. As I walked further, I began to notice strange marks on the trees, deep, jagged gouges, as though something had scraped its claws against them. At first I thought it might be from bears or wild cats, but the marks were too large, too deliberate. They were different from anything I'd ever seen before. And then, there was the smell, a foul, decaying odor that clung to the air, making my stomach churn. I pressed on, though the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and an instinctive dread washed over me. I had to see this trail through. It was my job. But as I rounded a bend, I came face to face with something I could never have imagined. There, in the clearing ahead of me, stood a creature. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest, as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. It was tall, at least 7 feet, covered in matted, dark fur that looked like it had been scorched by fire. Its face was twisted and grotesque, with eyes that were too wide and too empty, like black pits sucking. In all the light around them, its mouth was open, revealing rows of jagged teeth that seemed to glint in the dim light filtering through the trees. The creature stared at me, and for a moment, I thought it was studying me, weighing whether or not I was worth its time. Its body was emaciated, the skin stretched too tightly over its bones, giving it a skeletal, unnatural appearance. But the most terrifying part was the way it moved, or rather, the way it didn't move. Its body was still, but its gaze followed me, never blinking, never looking away. My instincts screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. My feet felt like they were glued to the earth, rooted in place by an overwhelming sense of fear, and then, it shifted, not its body, but the air around us. The world seemed to tilt, and the trees around me began to bend, as if they were part of its will. The silence deepened, stretching out into something suffocating. I could feel the pressure on my chest, as if the very forest was closing in on me. The creature didn't move an inch, but its presence seemed to grow larger, more oppressive, and I realized then that it wasn't just the creature that was unnatural. It was the entire place. I don't know how long I stood there, locked in that surreal moment. I was shaken from my paralysis by the faintest noise, the sound of something moving through the brush behind me. My heart leaped in my throat, and instinctively, I turned to look. There was nothing there. When I looked back at the creature, it was gone. The clearing was empty, as if it had never been there, but the air still felt heavy, thick with the scent of rot, and the trees around me seemed to lean closer, as if they were listening to my every breath. I didn't wait to see if it would return. I turned on my heel and ran, sprinting down the trail as fast as I could, not daring to look back. I didn't stop until I reached the safety of the ranger station, gasping for breath, my body trembling with the aftershock of what I had seen. That night, I researched the creature. The locals had a name for it, the Hollow Beast. They said it was a spirit, a creature of the forest that had once been human, cursed and transformed by the land. The stories told of people who had ventured too deep into the forest, only to be hunted down and taken by the beast. Some said it fed on fear, while others believed it simply watched, waiting for its next victim to make the mistake of trespassing into its domain. The next day, I went to the forest's edge to collect myself, to make sense of what I had experienced. I stood there at the trail's entrance, looking out over the darkening woods. I hadn't heard the sound of a single bird all day, and the wind was still. It was as though the forest was waiting, biding its time. Then I saw something, a pair of glowing eyes, far back in the trees, watching me, and I knew, with a sickening certainty, that the Hollow Beast hadn't forgotten about me. I never went back to that part of the forest again. I left Cedar Hollow within the week, unable to shake the feeling that I was still being watched, that something was out there, waiting in the trees. If you ever find yourself in a place like Cedar Hollow, be careful where you tread. Some forests are not meant to be explored, and some creatures are better left unseen. The first time I heard about the creature that haunted the woods near our town, I was just a kid. My grandfather used to tell me stories around the campfire when I was young, spinning yarns of things that lurked just outside the light, waiting to be noticed. I never took those stories seriously until one summer night. I became the next victim of the creature that had haunted the forests for centuries. I was visiting my cousin, Laura, at her family's cabin in the remote mountains of Idaho. It was a quiet place, tucked away from the bustle of the world, and I had come to spend the summer with her. We spent our days hiking, fishing, and playing in the wild. But it wasn't long before I started hearing rumors about something that had been seen in the woods near her cabin. People called it the Watcher. The stories were vague, but they all shared one terrifying detail: a pair of glowing eyes. They said it wasn't human, nor was it any animal they could identify. It moved silently through the trees, watching anyone who ventured too far into its territory. Some people claimed they'd seen it from a distance. Others said they'd felt its gaze, even though they couldn't see it. No one had ever gotten close enough to confirm what it was, and those who tried didn't come back. At first I laughed it off. It was probably just a story passed down to scare the children, I thought. But the unease in the townsfolk's eyes told a different story. They weren't just scared. They were terrified. It wasn't until one evening, when Laura and I were out walking on one of the old trails behind our cabin, that I realized how real the stories were. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the woods, and the air was thick with the smell of pine and damp earth. We were deep in the forest when we noticed that it had gotten quieter, too quiet. The birds had stopped singing, and the wind no longer rustled the leaves. We kept walking, laughing, and joking, until Laura stopped abruptly. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her eyes scanning the trees. I listened, but heard nothing. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Something's watching us," she said, her voice trembling. I chuckled nervously. "It's just your imagination. There's nothing out here." But even as I said it, a sense of dread began to creep up my spine. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I had an overwhelming feeling that we were not alone. We continued walking, but every now and then, I'd catch a glimpse of something in the trees. A shadow darting between the trunks, too fast for me to focus on. Suddenly, Laura grabbed my arm. "Alex, look," she hissed, pointing ahead. I turned to look, and froze out there, just beyond the trail, were two glowing eyes, hovering in the darkness between the trees. They weren't the bright, reflective eyes of an animal. They were cold, unnatural, and they locked onto us with an intensity that made my blood run cold. "Do you see it?" Laura's voice was barely a whisper. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the gaze. It wasn't just watching us. It was studying us, sizing us up. A chill ran down my spine, and I knew, deep in my gut, that this was no ordinary animal. Without thinking, I grabbed Laura's hand and yanked her toward the cabin, pulling her away from the gaze that seemed to follow our every move. We didn't look back as we ran. The world around us felt distorted. The trees seemed to close in on us, the shadows stretching longer and longer, until they almost swallowed us whole. We didn't stop until we were safely inside the cabin, hearts pounding, gasping for breath. Laura's parents weren't home, so we sat in silence, the weight of what we had seen pressing down on us. Neither of us spoke for what felt like hours. The next morning, I decided to go back to the spot where we had seen the eyes, hoping that I could rationalize what had happened. Maybe it was just a trick of the light, or some animal with reflective eyes. But when I reached the trail, I felt the same chill from the night before, like the woods were alive with something dark and watching. And as I stood there, staring into the dense trees, I felt it again, the sensation that someone, or something, was still watching me. I turned to leave, but my foot snagged on something. I looked down and saw deep claw marks in the earth, as if something had dragged itself across the ground. The marks led further into the woods, disappearing into the darkness. I couldn't bring myself to follow them. It wasn't until a few days later that I heard the rumors about what had happened to people who ventured too far into the woods at night. They weren't just stories. One family had gone missing the year before, and when searchers found their abandoned campsite, there were no signs of struggle, only those glowing eyes staring out from the trees. I left the cabin a few days later, unable to shake the image of those eyes from my mind, but I couldn't forget what I had seen in the woods. The Watcher, whatever it was real, and it was out there, waiting for the next person to wander too far into its territory. I haven't been back to Harrow Creek since, and I don't think I ever will. If you're ever in the area, stay close to the trails and never wander off. And whatever you do, don't look into the woods at night, because if you do, you might see those eyes, those glowing, hollow eyes, and you'll know you're not alone. I wasn't always a believer in the strange, but something happened to me that I can't explain away. No matter how many times I try to tell myself it was just my mind playing tricks. It was the summer of 2015 when I moved into the old farmhouse, just outside Harrow Creek, a small town nestled deep in the Appalachian foothills. I'd always dreamed of escaping the city and finding a place where the only sound you heard at night was the wind rustling through the trees. What I didn't know was that Harrow Creek had a secret, something dark and twisted, hiding in its woods. The house I rented was a century-old building, creaky and covered in ivy, with a huge expanse of land behind it. The town had little to offer in terms of excitement, which was exactly what I wanted. I'd been working remotely as a freelance writer, and the isolation was appealing. I didn't expect much of anything, just peace and quiet. But what I didn't realize was that sometimes silence carries a heavy weight, and some things prefer to stay hidden in that silence. The first few weeks were uneventful. I spent my days writing, exploring the overgrown garden, and getting to know a few of the townsfolk. They were friendly enough, but always seemed a little too quiet when the subject of Harrow Creek's past came up. They'd steer the conversation away, and when I pressed for more, they'd exchange glances, as if they shared some unspoken pact. But I was used to people being cagey, especially in small towns. It was one evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, when I first noticed something strange. I had taken a walk through the woods behind my house, following an old trail that I'd discovered. The path was narrow, with overgrown grass and thorny bushes that scraped at my clothes as I walked. The deeper I went into the forest, the quieter. It became too quiet. It was like the woods themselves were holding their breath. The birds had stopped chirping, and even the breeze had died down. I thought I was imagining things, but then I saw it. At first it was just a shadow among the trees, a figure too tall and too thin to be a person. I thought it was some trick of the light, or perhaps an animal at first, but as I focused, I realized it wasn't moving like an animal. It stood perfectly still, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, its form stretched unnervingly thin. The figure had no discernible features, just a dark, hollow outline of a human-like shape. A shape that felt like it didn't belong. My heart skipped a beat. I thought about turning and running, but something kept me rooted to the spot. It was as if my body didn't want to believe what I was seeing. But then the figure moved, or rather, it seemed to glide toward me, its limbs impossibly long and its body unnaturally flexible. It wasn't walking, it was hovering, just above the forest floor, like it didn't even need to touch the ground. I couldn't breathe. I watched as it got closer, and I felt the air grow colder around me. My instincts screamed for me to run, but I couldn't. Something held me there, paralyzed in place. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure vanished into the trees, disappearing without a trace. I was left standing there, breathless, in the eerie silence. The following night, I decided to go back to the woods, hoping that what I had seen was just a hallucination, a trick of the light. But when I reached the same spot, I saw it again, closer this time, hovering just at the edge of the tree line. This time, it was watching me, its hollow, featureless face staring at me with an intensity that made my blood run cold. I didn't wait to see more. I turned and ran, my legs burning as I bolted back to the house. When I got home, I locked the doors and windows, my heart still pounding in my chest. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I had let my imagination get the best of me. But, deep down, I knew I had seen something. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It was like the creature, or whatever it was following me, always just beyond my sight. I'd hear strange sounds at night, faint tapping on my windows, the soft scraping of nails against the walls. I even found strange, deep scratches on the doorframe to the cellar, as though something had tried to claw its way in. The locals had warned me about the woods around Harrow Creek, but they never said why. They spoke of old legends, of things that roamed the forest at night, things that were neither human nor animal. They called it the Hollow Man, a creature of the forest that was said to have been born from the darkness itself. The Hollow Man was said to be a soul lost to the wilderness, twisted and turned into something monstrous. It was said to feed on the fear of its victims, drawing them deeper into the woods until they vanished forever. I didn't want to believe it. I tried to tell myself that it was all just folklore, that it was the stuff of nightmares and superstition. But the more I learned, the more I realized the stories were real. The creature kept coming back, appearing closer each time, watching, waiting. And then, one night, I heard a soft whisper in the dark. It was faint at first, like a breath on the wind, but then it grew louder. The voice called my name, soft and hollow. Like the wind itself, it was the Hollow Man. I tried to leave the house the next morning, but as I stepped outside, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The trees loomed larger, the forest darker. The path seemed to shift, becoming unfamiliar, as though the woods themselves were trying to keep me there. I don't know how long I stayed, trapped in the house, haunted by the Hollow Man. Every night, it would return, its figure always getting closer, its whispers growing louder. It was only when the town's sheriff came to check on me that I found out the truth. He had seen the same thing when he was young. He told me that every few years, someone would disappear, drawn into the woods by the creature, never to be seen again. It was a pattern. No one had ever survived long enough to tell the tale, but I wasn't the first to experience the Hollow Man. I would not be the last. I left Harrow Creek the very next day. The house is still there, abandoned now, just like the many others before it. I hear that people still go into the woods at night, looking for the Hollow Man. They never come back, and I can't help but wonder, was I just lucky to escape? Or was there something more to it? Something darker, hiding just beneath the surface of our world? It was a late autumn evening when I decided to take a hike through Black Hollow. The decision to go was almost impulsive. I had heard the rumors, of course, stories that had been passed down for generations, whispered around campfires by the old-timers in town. They spoke of strange things that haunted those woods, things that had an insatiable hunger. I didn't believe in folklore. At least, not until that night. I was just 20 years old when it happened, freshly out of college, and desperate for some peace of mind. I had been working odd jobs in town, my life mostly revolving around mundane tasks, but I was also an explorer at heart, always looking for the next thrill. Black Hollow was the perfect place to go for an overnight hike. It wasn't far from the town I had been staying in, and I'd heard about a small cabin deep in the forest. Abandoned, but still intact. The weather was crisp, the air filled with that faint chill that only autumn could bring. The trees were bare, their skeletal branches swaying in the wind, creating eerie creaks and groans in the quiet woods. There was something unsettling about the place. It wasn't just the emptiness or the silence. It was as if the woods themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something. I wasn't sure what exactly drew me to that particular area. Maybe it was the challenge, maybe it was the allure of the unknown, but the deeper I went, the more I felt the atmosphere shift. The trees grew thicker, and the trail became less visible. There was a deep sense of isolation out there, and the woods seemed to be closing in on me with every step. I reached the cabin by dusk, and as I stepped inside, I was struck by how cold it was. It wasn't just the typical chill of an autumn evening. It was an unnatural cold, the kind that sinks deep into your bones. I set up camp inside, my lantern casting faint, flickering shadows across the decaying wood. As night descended, I felt the weight of the place. There was a palpable tension in the air, as if the forest itself was watching, waiting for something to happen. That was when I first heard it. It started as a soft rustling in the woods, just beyond the tree line. At first, I dismissed it as an animal, maybe a deer or a raccoon, but the sound didn't stop. It grew louder, more deliberate, and then I heard something else, a low guttural growl that sent chills down my spine. It was deep and resonant, something that didn't belong in these woods, something larger than any animal I knew. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest as the growl echoed through the trees. It wasn't the sound of a bear or a wolf, something far worse. And that's when I remembered the stories, the ones about the Wendigo, an ancient creature, a malevolent spirit that roamed the forest, hungering for human flesh. It was said to be a creature of immense size, with gaunt, emaciated features, its body stretched and twisted by its hunger. A creature that would follow you, watch you, and wait for you to make the wrong move. I knew then that something was in the woods, and it was coming for me. The growling grew louder, closer. I could hear it moving through the underbrush, snapping branches and rustling the leaves. The sound was too rhythmic, too controlled, for it to be a wild animal. It was intelligent, hunting, and I was its prey. I grabbed my pack and flashlight, rushing to the cabin door. My breath came out in sharp gasps, and I fumbled with the door, desperate to get out and find safety. But before I could open it, I heard the unmistakable sound of something heavy scraping against the cabin wall. I froze. The growling had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. And then came the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, dragging along the ground. The door trembled in its frame, and I could feel the presence outside, massive and hungry. Without thinking, I threw the door open and sprinted into the woods, adrenaline flooding my system. The flashlight bounced wildly in my hand as I stumbled through the thick undergrowth. I could hear the thing behind me, moving swiftly, its feet slapping against the forest floor with terrifying speed. I ran for what felt like hours, my breath burning in my lungs. The forest seemed to stretch endlessly, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the trees were closing in on me, their branches clawing at my face, pulling me back. It was as though the woods themselves were alive, and they were conspiring with the Wendigo to keep me trapped. And then I saw it at first. I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but as I neared a small clearing, I saw the shape standing just beyond the trees. It was tall, unnaturally tall, its limbs long and skeletal. Its face was twisted in a grotesque mockery of humanity, hollow eyes sunken deep into its skull. The creature's body was gaunt, its skin pulled tight over the bones, like it hadn't eaten in years. And its mouth, it was wide, far too wide, a gaping maw, full of sharp, jagged teeth. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, as it locked eyes with me. The air around it seemed to warp, as if the world itself bent to the Wendigo's will. Without warning, it lunged at me. I didn't wait to see if it would catch me. I turned and ran, heart racing, terror overwhelming everything else. I could hear it behind me, chasing, the sound of its footsteps pounding the ground like thunder. I didn't know how I made it out of the forest. I ran until my legs gave out, until my chest felt like it might explode. I don't know how long I was running, but when I finally stumbled into town, I was a mess, covered in dirt and scratches, my eyes wide with the terror of what I'd seen. I told the local authorities, but they just brushed it off as exhaustion or wild animals. They didn't believe me. No one did. But I know what I saw. I know what hunted me in those woods. And I'll never forget the way it looked at me. The hunger in its eyes. Since that night, I haven't set foot near Black Hollow. I won't go near the forest again. But sometimes, when the wind howls through the trees, I hear that same growl. And I know the Wendigo is still out there, waiting for the next soul to wander too deep into the woods. And if you ever find yourself near Black Hollow, I beg you, don't go too far, because something in those woods is hungry, and it won't let you leave. I've never been the superstitious type. Growing up, my family would tell stories about the strange happenings around our small town. Whispers of creatures in the woods, things that went bump in the night. But I never put much stock into those old tales. I mean, who would? They were just stories, until the night I learned the truth. It all started when I moved to Blackstone, a small town nestled between towering forests and vast fields. I'd recently been offered a job as a park ranger, which seemed like the perfect opportunity to leave the city life behind and embrace the quiet solitude of nature. Blackstone itself was charming, full of small-town quirks, but the forests surrounding it, particularly Blackstone Woods, had a different vibe. It was the kind of place where you couldn't shake the feeling that you were being watched, no matter how open the space around you seemed. I'd heard rumors from the locals about strange happenings in the woods, particularly a creature they called the Beast. They described it as a large, shadowy figure with glowing eyes, a hulking mass that stalked the trees and the wilds. Some said it was a bear, an unusually large one, but others spoke of its glowing eyes and the way it seemed to appear and disappear at will, moving with an unnatural speed. At first, I laughed it off as local folklore, stories meant to keep children from wandering too far into the woods. But then, I started working my first night shift. My job wasn't glamorous, mostly checking the trails, making sure hikers were safe, and occasionally helping with search and rescue operations. Nothing too dangerous. But one night, as I patrolled the southernmost trail near Blackstone Woods, I felt something I had never felt before, an overwhelming sense of dread. The air grew colder, and the wind began to rustle through the branches, in a way that sounded almost deliberate. I stopped for a moment to take in my surroundings. The woods were unnaturally quiet, save for the occasional creak of a branch or the distant call of a bird. I glanced at my watch. It was just after midnight. The usual sounds of the woods were gone. No crickets, no owls, not even the rustling of small animals in the underbrush. I chalked it up to the late hour and continued my patrol. But as I made my way deeper into the woods, I noticed something odd. Broken branches, large paw prints in the mud, and a distinct smell in the air. It was a musky, foul scent, one I couldn't place. Like rotting meat mixed with wet fur. That's when I heard it. A low growl, so deep it vibrated in my chest. I froze, instinctively gripping the flashlight tighter. The growl came again, this time closer. I strained my ears, trying to locate the source of the sound. The growl was guttural, unlike anything I had ever heard before. It wasn't a bear, or any animal I knew. It was something else. I started to back away, keeping my flashlight aimed in the direction of the sound. That's when I saw it. Two glowing eyes peered at me from the darkness. They were massive, reflecting the light from my flashlight like twin orbs of amber fire. They were too high off the ground to be from any animal I knew. I knew bears, wolves, and even the occasional bobcat that roamed these parts. But this was different. My breath caught in my throat as the eyes moved, shifting and tracking me. Then, from the shadows, I saw the silhouette of a massive creature step forward. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a wolf. It was something far larger, far more terrifying. Its body was covered in matted fur, but the shape of it was wrong. Its limbs too long, its posture too hunched. My mind screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. I was rooted to the spot, staring at the creature. It stepped closer, moving with an unnatural grace for something so large. The growl continued, low and menacing, as it moved through the trees like a predator closing in on its prey. Then, without warning, it lunged. Instinct took over then, and I turned and sprinted as fast as I could, heart pounding in my chest, my feet stumbling over the uneven ground. The creature's growl echoed through the woods, following me like a shadow. I could hear its heavy breathing, feel the ground shake with each step it took. I didn't dare look back. I ran for what felt like miles, the woods twisting and turning around me. But the sound of the creature was always there, right behind me, just out of sight. I could feel it closing in. It wasn't until I reached the edge of the woods, where the trees gave way to the clearing by the ranger station, that I dared to stop. Gasping for breath, I spun around, but the creature was gone. The woods were silent once again, like nothing had happened at all. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up, watching the woods, my gun in hand, waiting for the beast to return, but it never did. The next morning I filed a report, but no one believed me. They said it was probably a bear or some other animal. The glowing eyes, maybe just a trick of the light. The growl, could have been the wind, they suggested. But I knew what I had seen. I knew what had chased me. I spent the next few weeks avoiding Blackstone Woods. But no matter how much I tried to stay away, the creature haunted me. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching me, waiting for me to return. And then one night, it came back. It was just before dawn when I heard it. The growl, deep and rumbling, from the trees outside the ranger station. I looked out the window, but saw nothing. But the eyes, those glowing eyes, they were back, peering at me from the darkness. I knew then that the creature, the beast of Blackstone Woods, would never let me go. It still watches me, even now. Every night, when the wind rustles through the trees, I hear that low growl, and I know it's out there, waiting. I don't go into the woods anymore, but I can never escape it. They're out there, waiting. And if you ever find yourself in the woods at night, make sure you're not the one there watching. I've never been the superstitious type. Growing up, my family would tell stories about the strange happenings around our small town. Whispers of creatures in the woods, things that went bump in the night, but I never put much stock into those old tales. I mean, who would? They were just stories. Until the night I learned the truth. It all started when I moved to Blackstone, a small town nestled between towering forests and vast fields. I'd recently been offered a job as a park ranger, which seemed like the perfect opportunity to leave the city life behind and embrace the quiet solitude of nature. Blackstone itself was charming, full of small-town quirks, but the forests surrounding it, particularly Blackstone Woods, had a different vibe. It was the kind of place where you couldn't shake the feeling that you were being watched, no matter how open the space around you seemed. I'd heard rumors from the locals about strange happenings in the woods, particularly a creature they called the Beast. They described it as a large, shadowy figure with glowing eyes, a hulking mass that stalked the trees and the wilds. Some said it was a bear, an unusually large one, but others spoke of its glowing eyes and the way it seemed to appear and disappear at will, moving with an unnatural speed. At first I laughed it off as local folklore, stories meant to keep children from wandering too far into the woods. But then, I started working my first night shift. My job wasn't glamorous, mostly checking the trails, making sure hikers were safe, and occasionally helping with search and rescue operations. Nothing too dangerous. But one night, as I patrolled the southernmost trail near Blackstone Woods, I felt something I had never felt before, an overwhelming sense of dread. The air grew colder, and the wind began to rustle through the branches, in a way that sounded almost deliberate. I stopped for a moment to take in the woods were unnaturally quiet, save for the occasional creak of a branch or the distant call of a bird. I glanced at my watch. It was just after midnight. The usual sounds of the woods were gone. No crickets, no owls, not even the rustling of small animals in the underbrush. I chalked it up to the late hour and continued my patrol. But as I made my way deeper into the woods, I noticed something odd. Broken branches, large paw prints in the mud, and a distinct smell in the air. It was a musky, foul scent, one I couldn't place, like rotting meat mixed with wet fur. That's when I heard it, a low growl, so deep it vibrated in my chest. I froze, instinctively gripping the flashlight tighter. The growl came again, this time closer. I strained my ears, trying to locate the source of the sound. The growl was guttural, unlike anything I had ever heard before. It wasn't a bear or any animal I knew. It was something else. I started to back away, keeping my flashlight aimed in the direction of the sound. That's when I saw it. Two glowing eyes peered at me from the darkness. They were massive, reflecting the light from my flashlight like twin orbs of amber fire. They were too high off the ground to be from any animal I knew. I knew bears, wolves, and even the occasional bobcat that roamed these parts. But this was different. My breath caught in my throat as the eyes moved, shifting and tracking me. Then, from the shadows, I saw the silhouette of a massive creature step forward. It wasn't a bear, it wasn't a wolf. It was something far larger, far more terrifying. Its body was covered in matted fur, but the shape of it was wrong. Its limbs too long, its posture too hunched. My mind screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. I was rooted to the spot, staring at the creature. It stepped closer, moving with an unnatural grace for something so large. The growl continued, low and menacing, as it moved through the trees like a predator closing in on its prey. Then, without warning, it lunged. Instinct took over then, and I turned and sprinted as fast as I could, heart pounding in my chest, my feet stumbling over the uneven ground. The creature's growl echoed through the woods, following me like a shadow. I could hear its heavy breathing, feel the ground shake with each step it took. I didn't dare look back. I ran for what felt like miles, the woods twisting and turning around me. But the sound of the creature was always there, right behind me, just out of sight. I could feel it closing in. It wasn't until I reached the edge of the woods, where the trees gave way to the clearing by the ranger station, that I dared to stop. Gasping for breath, I spun around, but the creature was gone. The woods were silent once again, like nothing had happened at all. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up, watching the woods, my gun in hand, waiting for the beast to return, but it never did. The next morning I filed a report, but no one believed me. They said it was probably a bear or some other animal. The glowing eyes, maybe just a trick of the light. The growl could have been the wind, they suggested, but I knew what I had seen. I knew what had chased me. I spent the next few weeks avoiding Blackstone Woods, but no matter how much I tried to stay away, the creature haunted me. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching me, waiting for me to return. And then one night, it came back. It was just before dawn when I heard it. The growl, deep and rumbling, from the trees outside the ranger station. I looked out the window, but saw nothing. But the eyes, those glowing eyes, they were back, peering at me from the darkness. I knew then that the creature, the beast of Blackstone Woods, would never let me go. It still watches me, even now. Every night, when the wind rustles through the trees, I hear that low growl, and I know it's out there, waiting. I don't go into the woods anymore, but I can never escape it. I'd always thought of myself as a rational person, the kind of person who preferred science over superstition, facts over folklore. That was, until I moved to Crow Hollow. At first, it seemed like a perfect escape, away from the noise of the city, the hustle of everyday life, and into the quiet arms of nature. The house I found was a little run down, but it had character, and the price was right. I thought it would be a peaceful retreat, a place to unwind and reset. But from the moment I stepped foot in Crow Hollow, something felt off. It wasn't anything I could pinpoint, just a vague feeling that something wasn't quite right. I shrugged it off at first, convincing myself it was just the isolation playing tricks on my mind. But as the days passed, the unease grew stronger, more persistent. It started small. At night, I would hear scratching sounds coming from the walls. It wasn't the house settling, like I had hoped. The noises came from somewhere deeper, like something, or someone, was trapped inside the walls, trying to escape. I tried to ignore it, but it kept happening. Every night, at precisely 2 a.m., I would hear the scratching. It would start slowly, almost imperceptible, and then grow louder, more frantic, until I could hardly stand it anymore. I decided to investigate. One night, when the scratching began, I grabbed a flashlight and crept into the attic, thinking I might find a squirrel or some other animal that had gotten trapped. But when I opened the door to the attic, I was met with an overwhelming silence, the kind of silence that presses in on you, making your ears ring. I searched the attic, but there was nothing. No sign of an animal, no sign of anything. I thought I was losing my mind. But then, I found something strange. At the far end of the attic, under the floorboards, there was an old, tattered box. I hadn't seen it before, but it was clearly out of place. The box was small, about the size of a shoebox, and it looked ancient, the wood warped and cracked. Hesitant but curious, I pried it open. Inside, there was nothing but a single sheet of paper. It was yellowed with age and brittle, and when I unfolded it, I saw that it was covered in strange symbols. They looked like a combination of writing and drawings, but none of it made any sense to me. At the bottom of the page, scrawled in large, uneven letters, was one word, "Watcher." My heart skipped a beat as I stared at the word. It was a word I had never seen before, but somehow, it felt familiar. Something in the pit of my stomach twisted, a cold, gnawing feeling that I couldn't explain. I carefully folded the paper back and put it back in the box, my hands shaking. I didn't want to touch it anymore. That night, the scratching was louder than ever. But now, it wasn't just the walls. It was coming from outside. From the woods. I stepped out onto the porch, heart pounding, the cold night air biting at my skin. The woods were dark, impossibly dark, and the trees seemed to stretch endlessly into the night. I felt a strange pressure in the air, like the world was holding its breath. And then I saw it, a pair of eyes, glowing faintly in the distance. They were too high off the ground to be an animal's eyes, but too far away to make out any details. They blinked, and then disappeared into the trees, vanishing like a shadow. I froze, my mind racing. That wasn't normal. It couldn't be. The next morning, I decided to talk to the locals. I drove into the nearby town and stopped by the small grocery store. The woman behind the counter, a kindly old woman named Clara, greeted me with a smile. I asked her about Crow Hollow, about the history of the area, and if there were any strange occurrences that people talked about. Her expression changed immediately. Her smile faded, and she looked at me with a kind of pity in her eyes. "You're new around here, aren't you?" she asked, her voice soft. I nodded, feeling uneasy. "You've been hearing the scratching, haven't you?" Clara asked. I was taken aback. How did she know? She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "You're not the first. It's been happening for years, long before you moved in. People used to say it was just a trick of the wind, or maybe the sound of animals in the night. But I know better, and I think you do too." "What do you mean?" I asked, my throat dry. Clara sighed and glanced around as if making sure no one else was listening. "There's something in those woods. Something old. Something that's been watching this place long before any of us got here. It's not a spirit. Not exactly. Some folks call it the Watcher. It comes out at night, watching, listening. And it's always been tied to that house, ever since it was built." I felt a chill run down my spine. "The Watcher." "Yes," Clara said, her voice trembling. "There's a story. A legend, really. A long time ago, there was a man. Some say he was a hermit. Others say he was part of a secret society, who built a cabin near Crow Hollow. He was obsessed with something. In the woods. Something that lived there. Something that he believed was ancient. He thought if he built his cabin in the right spot, he could make contact with it. But he never did. He disappeared without a trace. And after that, the fog started rolling in, and the Watcher appeared." She paused, her face pale. "It doesn't just watch. It waits. And when the time is right, it takes." I felt my stomach twist. Takes what?" Clara shook her head. "No one knows for sure, but it's never left anyone who lived in that house the same. People go mad. They disappear. And the scratching. That's the Watcher, trying to get in. It's always there, waiting." I didn't know what to believe. I wasn't sure I wanted to. That night, I didn't sleep. The scratching came again, louder, almost frantic. I could hear it outside, too, scratching against the door, the windows. And then, a voice, soft but unmistakable, whispered from the woods. "I see you." I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I know now what Clara meant. I know what it is to be watched by something that isn't quite human. To be seen. To be hunted by something that has no beginning and no end. And I know that it will never stop watching me. I've left Crow Hollow now, but the Watcher follows me. It's in my dreams, in the quiet moments when I think I'm alone. The scratching never stops. And the eyes are always there, waiting in the darkness. I don't think I'll ever be free of it. I can still remember the first time I saw it. I had been working a long shift at the local diner when my friend Jessie called. She sounded strange, her voice wavering, like she was unsure of what to say. But when she told me about the fog, I knew it wasn't just a normal weather pattern. Something about the way she said it, her voice tinged with fear, made me think that whatever she had witnessed was something beyond the ordinary. Jessie and I had known each other for years, and we often took weekend trips out to the outskirts of town to unwind. There was an old creek about an hour away, called Hollow Creek, and it was known for being pretty remote, even if there were some local legends about strange occurrences. We had visited the place many times, though, and it was nothing but a quiet, scenic spot with a small waterfall and thick trees surrounding it. That day, though, was different. It was nearly dusk when I arrived at the creek. The air was damp and thick, and I could see a faint mist swirling around the base of the trees, creeping like smoke from an unseen fire. It wasn't uncommon for fog to roll in over the creek in the evening, but this fog, it was different. It seemed denser, more unnatural, as though it had a life of its own. Jessie was standing at the water's edge, staring out into the mist, her expression distant. When she noticed me approaching, she blinked as if waking from a trance. You saw it, didn't you? I asked as I stood beside her. She nodded slowly, her eyes wide and filled with a mixture of fear and confusion. I don't know what it was. At first I thought it was just the fog, but then I saw something moving in it. Something big. I glanced at the fog, which seemed to swirl more violently now, as if it was alive. The trees on the far side of the creek were obscured, and I felt a creeping unease crawl over my skin. Something big? I asked, trying to steady my voice, though I wasn't sure I believed her. Jessie had always been the imaginative type, but this felt different. I don't know how to explain it, she said quietly, her voice shaking. It wasn't an animal, but it moved like one. But the way it moved, the way the fog seemed to follow it, it felt wrong, like it was part of the fog. And then I heard it. Hear what? The whispers, Jessie whispered, her eyes darting to the fog again. There were voices, low, like murmuring. I thought I was losing my mind, but then I saw it. It was there, in the fog. I swallowed hard. I didn't want to believe her, but something in her eyes told me she wasn't lying. I turned to look at the swirling fog again, feeling the pressure in my chest tighten. Something was out there. We should go, I said, my voice firm, but Jessie didn't move. She was staring into the fog like she was hypnotized, her face pale. Jessie, I said sharply, grabbing her arm. Let's go now. She finally looked at me, but there was a coldness in her eyes that sent a shiver down my spine. It's too late. You're already here. Before I could respond, I felt a shift in the air. The temperature dropped suddenly, and I could see my breath coming out in small puffs, despite the summer warmth that had clung to the air only moments ago. The fog began to thicken even more, swirling and twisting like it was alive, and the whispers grew louder. They were indistinguishable at first, like 1,000 voices murmuring all at once. But then one word broke through the noise. Join us. I froze, the words echoing in my mind like a chant. My heart raced as I looked at Jessie, whose eyes were now wide and glassy, as if she were in some kind of trance. She stepped forward, toward the fog, her movements slow and deliberate. Jessie, no, I shouted, but my voice barely carried above the whispering. I reached out to grab her, but as soon as my hand brushed her arm, I felt an icy chill seep into my skin. The air around us was thick with the fog, now swirling in unnatural patterns. The ground seemed to tremble beneath our feet, and then, just as I was about to pull her back, I saw it, a shape, a dark silhouette emerging from the fog. It was tall, taller than a man, its figure obscured by the mist, but I could make out the movement, slow and deliberate. The fog parted around it, revealing what looked like a creature, though I couldn't fully comprehend it. Its body was too long, limbs too thin, and its head was a mass of shifting shadows, a face that didn't look human. The shape was outlined by an eerie, almost glowing aura. Its eyes, or what I assumed were its eyes, burning yellow like the deepest parts of the fog itself. I pulled Jessie back with all my strength, but her eyes were locked on the creature, her mouth slightly open, as if she were in a trance. Run, I screamed, but it was too late. The creature took a step toward us, its feet making no sound on the ground. As it moved, the fog seemed to follow it, swirling with increasing intensity. In the chaos, Jessie let out a gasp, a high-pitched scream that was cut short as she began to stumble forward, as though pulled by an invisible force. I had no choice. I grabbed her again, pulling her away, my hand slipping on her arm as I tried to drag her back. The creature made no sound, but I could feel its presence growing closer. Its looming, oppressive weight filling the air around us. With all my might, I yanked Jessie away, and finally, we broke free from the fog. We ran, through the trees, up the hill, not looking back. I couldn't stop to see if the creature followed, but I didn't need to. I could feel it behind us, watching, waiting. By the time we made it to the road, the fog was gone. It dissipated as suddenly as it had arrived, and the forest was quiet once again. The only sound was our heavy breathing as we collapsed onto the dirt road. Covered in sweat and dirt, Jessie sat there, trembling, staring at the woods. Her eyes wide and unseeing. I didn't know what that thing was, or what it had wanted with us, but I knew one thing. Hollow Creek wasn't just a quiet spot in the woods. It was something older, something darker. And whatever it was, it hadn't forgotten we were there. That night, we drove home in silence. Neither of us spoke a word about the creature, but I could feel the weight of it in the air. Sometimes, when the fog rolls in, I still hear those whispers, drifting on the wind, calling out to me, beckoning me back to Hollow Creek. I've always been the type of person who enjoys the quiet. Long walks through the woods, late night drives with no destination, or just sitting in my room, lost in a book or music. When I was younger, my parents often took me to a cabin by a place called Widow's Peak. It wasn't a popular spot. In fact, most people around the area seemed to avoid it, but my family liked the solitude. It was an old, weathered cabin nestled at the edge of a dense forest, the kind you'd find in a horror novel or on a forgotten trail map. There were no neighbors, no bustling roads, just the faint sounds of wildlife and the wind rustling through the trees. I used to love it there, feeling like the world didn't matter when we were surrounded by nature. I was 19 the last time I went back. It had been 5 years since I had visited Widow's Peak, and my parents had sold the cabin shortly after. It was one of those places that held fond memories, but I didn't know if I could return again. Not after what happened. I arrived by myself, wanting to reconnect with the place. I wasn't expecting much. The cabin was long gone, the site now abandoned and overtaken by vines and creeping weeds. The road that led to the peak was little more than a dirt trail, barely visible through the overgrowth, but I felt drawn to it, like something was calling me back. It was already late in the evening when I arrived, the sky a bruised purple with hints of orange on the horizon. The air was thick, heavy with moisture. I set up camp near where the cabin had once stood, but there was an odd feeling in the air. I tried to brush it off. After all, it had been years. The trees around Widow's Peak were older now. The wind through the branches still carried that eerie, hollow sound. That night, as I sat by the campfire, the wind picked up. It wasn't an ordinary wind, either. It was sharp, cutting through the air, carrying with it a low murmur that sounded like whispers. I figured it was just the rustling of the leaves, but the closer the whispers came, the clearer they became. It wasn't the wind. It was as though something was trying to speak to me from the darkness. I stood up, scanning the trees around me, my heart beginning to race. "Hello," I called out, but my voice felt small and insignificant against the vastness of the forest. There was no reply, just the slow sway of branches, the soft groan of wood creaking under the pressure of the wind. I was about to turn back to my campfire when I saw it, a figure, standing at the edge of the tree line. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, or perhaps my mind playing games with me, but then it moved. Slowly, too slowly, like something was trying to stay out of sight, while also drawing closer. I could see its outline against the dark shadows of the trees, tall, unnaturally tall, and thin, like a man but with limbs that seemed to stretch unnaturally. Its head was large, too large for its body, and it hung low, as if it was staring at the ground. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to move, to run, but my body wouldn't listen. I stood rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear, watching, as the figure stepped into the light of the campfire. The moment it was fully visible, I gasped. It was no man. Its skin was gray and stretched tight over its bones, with jagged veins pulsing beneath the surface like something alive. Its eyes were wide, unblinking, and black as coal, empty and lifeless. The creature's face was disturbingly elongated, the features sharp and angular, and its mouth, when it opened, was too wide, filled with rows of yellow teeth that seemed to curve backward. I couldn't see its hands, but I knew they were there, hidden just beneath the forest's edge. And then it spoke, not in words. The whispering sound I'd heard earlier grew louder, like a chorus of voices, soft and urgent, coming from the creature's mouth. The sound was familiar and alien all at once, a haunting rhythm of words I could almost understand, but not quite. It was as though the creature was trying to speak to me through a veil, and the more I listened, the more I understood that it was pleading, desperate. I backed away slowly, my legs shaking beneath me. "What do you want?" I whispered, though I knew it wouldn't answer. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to know. The figure seemed to hesitate, tilting its head as if it was considering my question. And then, it began to move closer, its long limbs reaching out from the shadows. I stumbled back further, my feet tangled in the brush as I tripped and fell to the ground. My heart hammered in my chest as I scrambled to stand. A voice, clear and distinct, cut through the growing whispers. "Run." I didn't need another word. I bolted, pushing through the brush and trees, not daring to look back. The whispers followed me, growing louder as I ran, until I could hear nothing else but the eerie sound of voices chasing after me. I didn't stop until I reached the road, the safety of the open space, where the trees could no longer close in around me. The wind was still howling, but the whispers were gone. I made it back to my car, shaking uncontrollably, heart still racing. I didn't look back at Widow's Peak. I couldn't. There was something about that place, something ancient, something hungry, that had been waiting for me. I never went back. I don't know what it was that I saw, but I've heard the stories. The locals say the place is cursed, that something dark lurks within the trees. They call it the Watcher, an entity that has lived in the forest for centuries, feeding off the souls of the curious dot. To this day, when I close my eyes, I hear the whispers from the trees, the low murmur of voices too distant to understand. And sometimes, just sometimes, I feel as though I'm being watched. Maybe I'm not the only one who's been there. It wasn't supposed to be anything special, just a weekend getaway. The kind of trip where you pack light and forget about the rest of the world for a couple of days. I remember the car ride like it was yesterday. My boyfriend Aaron and I were heading to Black Oak Hollow, a secluded area deep in the Appalachian Mountains. The plan was simple: hiking, cooking over a fire, maybe a couple of beers. It was supposed to be peaceful, but I should have listened to the warnings. I should have paid more attention when people started mentioning the name of the place in hushed tones, Black Oak Hollow, where people said strange things happened, and strange things had happened for generations. People talked about it like it was cursed, but at the time I thought they were just stories. Tales told around a fire to make the night feel a little more interesting. The road that led us there twisted and turned, a dark ribbon cutting through, thick woods that seemed to press in on us. It wasn't long before we lost cell service, and as the sun began to set, the only light came from the dim headlights of the car and the faint glow of the stars above. That's when I noticed it, that feeling, a sense that something was watching us, lurking just outside the range of our vision. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but Aaron seemed to feel it too. He kept glancing at the rearview mirror, frowning as if something was off, but he didn't say anything. He never did when he was bothered, just stayed quiet, hands tight on the wheel. We reached the cabin after what felt like hours, parked outside the small wooden structure that had been rented for the weekend. It was old enough to have that musty, wooden smell that I wasn't used to, and isolated, with a large porch and a view that looked out over the forest. It felt like we were the only ones for miles. The first night passed in the usual way. We ate dinner, drank some wine, and laughed at old inside jokes. But the second night, that's when everything changed. We decided to take a walk before it got too late. The forest surrounding the cabin was thick and dark, with only the light of the moon filtering through the canopy of trees. We followed a narrow path, barely wide enough for the both of us. The air was thick with humidity, and every sound seemed to carry crickets, leaves rustling, the distant sound of an owl. But as we walked deeper into the woods, something felt wrong. I could hear Aaron's steps behind me, but it felt like the distance between us was growing, like the woods were stretching out, becoming wider, darker. Every so often I'd hear something else, something that wasn't quite the forest. Footsteps, but not ours. A snap of a twig, a rustle of leaves. I stopped and turned back to him. "Do you hear that?" I asked. Aaron, who had been walking behind me, had suddenly stopped as well. He looked uneasy. "Yeah, it's like footsteps, but no one's here." We stood there for a moment, listening to the silence around us. That's when I saw it. A figure, standing just out of the light, barely visible through the trees. It was tall, maybe over 7 feet, and thin, like a shadow stretched too far. I couldn't make out any details at first, just the shape, standing still. "Aaron," I whispered, my voice trembling. "There's something out there." He squinted into the darkness, but whatever it was, it moved. Fast. Too fast. Too fast. One moment, it was standing there, and the next, it vanished into the underbrush, leaving nothing but an unsettling silence behind. My heart was racing as I grabbed Aaron's arm. "Let's go back." We turned to head back toward the cabin, but the forest seemed to change. The path we had walked just moments before now seemed unfamiliar, as if the trees had shifted. The sounds of the forest had vanished, replaced by a strange, deep hum that seemed to vibrate through the ground. Aaron pulled out his phone, but there was no signal, just static, like the world around us had been erased. Panic was starting to creep in. We had to keep moving. As we made our way back toward the cabin, that's when I saw it again. The figure, only this time, it wasn't just standing there. It was moving along the tree line, just barely visible through the undergrowth, keeping pace with us. Every time we stopped, it stopped. When we started walking again, it moved just out of reach. It was toying with us. By the time we reached the cabin, we were both shaking. I didn't want to admit it, but I knew we were being hunted. I locked the door behind us and looked out the window, hoping to see nothing, but it was there, just on the edge of the trees, watching us. Its eyes were glowing faintly, yellow like the moon. That night, we didn't sleep. The sound of something scraping against the walls kept us awake. Every time we tried to open the blinds, the figure would vanish. But when we would try to sleep again, the sound would start once more, closer now, like something was circling the cabin. By dawn, it had stopped. The woods were quiet once again, but we couldn't leave fast enough. The drive back was long and silent. Neither of us spoke about what had happened, but I knew Aaron had seen it too. Whatever it wasn't human. We didn't talk about Black Oak Hollow when we got back to the city. We told ourselves it was just a strange experience, that our minds had played tricks on us. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still feel those eyes on me, watching from the edge of the trees, and I know I'll never set foot in Black Oak Hollow again. I was 19 this summer it happened, back when I thought I had something to prove. Me and 3 friends, Derek, Luis, and Hannah, took off for a week-long camping trip in Red Elk Forest. It wasn't a national park or anything glamorous like that, just a thick, quiet patch of wilderness in Montana. miles from the nearest town. The kind of place where GPS cuts out and the sky feels 100 miles deep. We wanted solitude, maybe a little adventure, and we got it. The first couple of days were exactly what we wanted. Campfires, canned food, hiking trails no one had used in years. At night, we'd pass a flask and tell each other scary stories, none of which felt real until the third night. That was the first time we heard the crying. It was past midnight. We were zipped up in our tents when it started. At first I thought it was an animal, some wounded thing limping through the woods. But the longer it went on, the more human it sounded. High-pitched, like a child sobbing quietly, but never gasping for air. It circled the camp once, then twice, then vanished. We didn't talk about it the next morning. I think none of us wanted to admit how close it had sounded, or that it followed a perfect circle around our tents. The next night, it came again. Louder this time, closer. I unzipped the tent, just an inch, enough to peek out. I wish I hadn't. There was something just beyond the firelight, tall, bony, wrapped in filthy rags or maybe skin. I couldn't tell. Its head was too small, its limbs too long. It stood motionless while the crying sound came from somewhere deeper in the trees, like it was a recording playing in the distance. The thing itself didn't move, didn't even blink, just watched. I closed the zipper, didn't say a word. In the morning, we found the prints. They weren't shaped like any foot I've ever seen. They looked like elongated hands, 7 fingers, not 5, with talon-like tips pressed into the mud. They circled the tents, looping tighter and tighter, like it had paced all night. Luis wanted to leave. Hannah did too. But Derek was always the bold one, or maybe just stupid. He said it was probably a prank. Local kids messing with us. He wanted to follow the tracks, so we did. They led us deeper into the woods, off the trail, and past where the trees grew so thick, the sun barely touched the ground. We followed for nearly an hour before the forest went dead silent. No birds, no wind, even the air felt thicker. That's when we saw it. A clearing, completely unnatural. Perfect circle, just like our camp. At the center was a massive nest of bones, not twigs or leaves, bones. Deer, raccoons, maybe even dogs. And in the center was a child's doll, missing an eye, soaked in something dark and dried. Next to it, something scratched into the dirt. You heard me. That's when Hannah screamed. It was back, right at the edge of the clearing, crawling now, impossibly fast. The crying started again, but now, it was inside our heads. I could feel it, rattling behind my eyes. Derek shouted for us to run. We did. Branches whipped past my face. I could barely breathe. I heard Luis behind me stumble and fall, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. The crying was growing louder, not from one place, but from everywhere. We made it back to camp just as the sun dipped low. Luis came running 10 minutes later, scraped and pale. We didn't talk. We packed. We hiked through the night. Made it to the car by dawn. We didn't look back. Red Elk doesn't show up on most maps. The few locals we asked after the fact just nodded quietly when we described what happened. One old woman, a waitress at a roadside diner, said, "Some things cry to trick you. Doesn't mean they feel." That was 5 years ago. I don't camp anymore, but sometimes I still hear it. Usually after dark. Usually when I'm alone. It was the thick fog that set me on edge. I was 24, fresh out of college, still unsure about where life was headed. I had spent years living in a small town just outside of Denver, with the weight of schoolwork always hovering over me. So, when I finally had the opportunity to get away for a few days, I jumped at it. My best friend, Sarah, and I packed our things and headed toward Cold Springs, a cabin rental just off the grid. We were supposed to relax, to leave behind the noise and chaos. I should have known, though, when I first heard about Cold Springs from the old man at the gas station, that something wasn't quite right. He warned me in that strange, broken voice of his, something about not staying out too late and avoiding the river. His eyes darted to the dark clouds on the horizon, but I thought nothing of it. People in small towns tend to get superstitious about places they don't understand, right? We reached the cabin just before sundown. It was exactly what I had hoped for. A small wooden house, tucked away between towering pines. The only sound was the whisper of the wind through the trees. We dropped our bags, made dinner, and laughed as we cracked open a bottle of wine. But then night fell, and with it came the fog. It rolled in thick and fast, swallowing up the mountainside like an ancient beast. From the windows, I could barely make out the outline of the trees, let alone the river the man had mentioned. The chill settled into my bones, but I told myself, it was just the weather. It was normal to be cold in the mountains at night. After all, we decided to turn in early, or at least I tried. As soon as I settled into the bed, the house felt wrong. The walls felt too thin, and the air grew too heavy. I tried to ignore the creeping sense of dread, but it gnawed at the edges of my mind. I must have fallen asleep at some point, but the dream was worse than any nightmare I'd had before. I was standing at the edge of a river, the water black and still. A voice, soft, pleading, called to me from the other side. It was a woman's voice, distorted, like someone trying to speak through the deepest part of the ocean. My feet were rooted to the earth, my body frozen. Every time I tried to turn away, the voice grew louder, more desperate. I woke up with a gasp, the sound of the voice still echoing in my head, but I wasn't sure if I had actually heard it in my dream, or if it had followed me back into the waking world. I could hear Sarah's soft breathing from the other bed. I thought about getting up, but the thought of stepping into the dense fog outside made my skin crawl. The next day, we ventured out to explore the surrounding woods. The fog was still thick, and we found ourselves walking in circles, unable to find any clear path. We ended up stumbling upon an old, abandoned shack near the river. It was completely run down, the roof caved in, and the windows long shattered, but there was something unsettling about it, like it had been waiting for us. Sarah, ever the adventurous one, suggested we go inside. I was reluctant, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside, it was musty and dark, the floor covered in layers of dust. We walked through the rooms slowly, our footsteps echoing in the silence. That's when I noticed the strange symbols etched into the walls. They were crude, hastily carved, but still too deliberate to be random. Some of them looked like eyes, others like twisted faces. My stomach twisted in response, and I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. "Look at this," Sarah said, pointing toward the far wall. There was a large symbol painted in what looked like dark red stains. The edges were rough, but it was unmistakable. It resembled a spiraling circle with jagged lines radiating from it. "It's like a warning," she whispered, more to herself than to me. That's when the wailing started. At first, I thought it was the wind, but as the sound grew louder, I realized it wasn't just the wind. It was human, a voice, high-pitched, raw, and unrelenting. The sound of someone in pain. It echoed from the riverbank, a long, drawn-out wail that sent an icy chill through my veins. Sarah and I exchanged nervous glances, both of us rooted in place for a moment before we both turned and bolted out of the shack. We ran back to the cabin, our hearts racing, adrenaline coursing through our veins. When we got inside, we locked every door, every window, and huddled in the living room in silence. But even then, we could hear it, softly at first, and then more clearly. The crying, growing louder, like someone was trying to reach us. The sound of desperation. Sarah was the first to break the silence. We need to leave. Right now. I didn't argue. We gathered our things, ready to pack up and leave. But when we went outside to head for the truck, the fog had completely engulfed the cabin. It was so thick, we could barely see our hands in front of our faces. And then I heard it, the wail again, so close now that it felt as though it was just on the other side of the fog, waiting for us. I felt the hair on my neck stand up as the temperature seemed to drop. "Get in the truck," I urged Sarah, my voice strained with panic. We rushed to the truck, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the keys. I could still hear the wailing. It wasn't fading, like I had expected. It was coming from all around us now, surrounding us like a chorus of ghosts. The fog seemed to close in, thickening around us until the world outside the truck was nothing but a white blur. And then, right beside us, I saw her, a figure, pale and disfigured, standing in the fog just outside the window. Her face was twisted, eyes wide and empty, the skin stretched too tightly across her bones. Her mouth was open, and from it, the wail continued, louder now, desperate. I slammed the truck into gear and sped out of there. But as I drove, I could hear the wailing still, like it was chasing us, following us through the fog. We didn't stop until we reached the nearest town hours later. We never went back to Cold Springs. The place was gone from the maps, no one could tell us what had happened. But the look in their eyes, when we mentioned the fog, the wailing, it was like they knew. I don't know who, or what, was out there, in those woods. But it's been years, and sometimes, when I'm alone in the dark, I still hear it. The wailing, it haunts me. Sometimes, I think it's calling me back.